Hey chat, how much fitness do you think I can gain in 90 weeks? 90 weeks? How much fitness do you think I can gain in 90 days? Like, give me exact numbers.
You likely be looking at an FTP of around.
In October 2025, I did a lab lactate accumulation assessment to figure out what my current FTP was, LT1, LT2. And I gave all the data to ChatGPT to help me come up with a plan. I then followed that plan rigorously, and I repeated my lactate accumulation assessment just a couple of days ago. So in this video, I really want to ask myself a couple of questions. Number one, how much fitness can I gain on the ChatGPT plan? And number two, is ChatGPT, is AI in general, good enough to replace cycling coaches? What are the benefits of using AI? What are the limitations of using AI to come up with your cycling plan? And how is the experience overall?
Okay, so first thing you have to know about using ChatGPT in general, this is not just cycling specific, but the biggest mistake most people make with AI is treating it like a search engine or like Google. You can't just ask it a simple question and expect a great response. You can't go, hey ChatGPT, write me a 90-day training plan to improve my FTP and expect a good response. You have to understand that prompt engineering is a skill that you need to know in order to get the results that you want to get from ChatGPT or from AI in general. You have to actually give it a good prompt. And what does a good prompt include? Well, it includes telling it what the role that you want it to act as is. Giving it context, the more the better. Telling it exactly what you want it to do in detail and what you don't want it to do, and reiterating time and time again. So let me give you a little bit more detail.
The keys to a really good plan are, number one, data, and number two, context. I think if you don't give it the data that it needs and you don't give it the context that it needs, and it'll give you the most generic 12-week plan that will not fit into your lifestyle, into your goals, your capabilities, your strengths, adapt around your weaknesses. So if you want to extract a good plan and make the best out of AI, I think there's a lot of potential to come up with a fantastic plan, but you need data and you need context. And those are two things it's not going to ask unless you tell it. The more context, the better. This is the same way, when you sign up with a cycling coach, typically, if they're a semi-decent coach, they're going to send you an intake form. And an intake form is not just collecting information about, your age, your weight, your BMI, your how many hours a week you want to train, but it's collecting a lot of information. We want to know everything, because the more context you can give us, the more accurate depiction we can get of who you are as a person, what your constraints are, what your strengths are. And it just gives a whole 360-degree picture. And data is extremely important, and not just any data. It has to be accurate. You can go ahead on Zwift right now and do a ramp test, but it might be off. Maybe, like me, you have a strong glycolytic engine, meaning you might skew the numbers simply because you can hold anaerobic efforts for a little bit longer. And so unless you go into gather accurate, reliable data on your body, perhaps like me, blood lactate, VO2 max, fractional utilization of VO2 max, mean maximal fat oxidation, all of these things have an impact on the plan. And so the key to any good plan, context and data. And I think once you have those two things, AI can make a really good plan, but you're going to have to continue prompting it.
Okay, so here's an example of what I would give to ChatGPT to analyze. Let's say I just did today's workout. Today's workout was 40 minutes, pure tempo. So I'll actually go into my training peaks. I'll hide some of the less important stuff like speed, elevation, smooth it out a little, highlight, and then I'll take that selection because this was the actual training aspect. So 35 minutes, plus or minus a little bit at the front. We'll look at that. I'll screenshot here, and then I'll upload it into ChatGPT and see what it says. So I just gave it to ChatGPT. I said, analyze today's workout. Analyze today's workout, and I gave it some context, which it probably would have figured out by itself. But this was a 35-minute tempo workout with an RPE of 5. So here's what it gave me. This is what the workout actually was. We had an average power of around 245, normalized 246, which is fantastic variability index. Average heart rate, max heart rate, intensity factor, the power to heart rate let's say cardiac drift or aerobic decoupling, negative 0.79, essentially zero drift. And then, moderate and extreme heat. This is steady state, which is fantastic. Despite the label tempo, this might be even a high tempo, low sweet spot. Intensity factor places it above your traditional tempo. Now, intensity factor is dependent on FTP. So this is where I would actually disagree with this, because it's classifying it based on the FTP that Training Peaks has set for me. But I haven't done an FTP test since, last time I did the FTP test, which is the beginning of this video. So already it's starting to question whether this was traditional tempo or low sweet spot. The heart rate, 156 average, puts me clearly above LT1, but below LT2, and I agree with that. Now, given the context I've given ChatGPT before, because I've given it context into the fact that I have very high lactate tolerance and a really high glycolytic profile, meaning I can produce high amounts of power for low time. Sometimes I may skew the numbers forward because of that. So it's saying low RPE does not mean a low stimulus. And then it's giving me an estimate about my current FTP, which I'm not going to share with you just quite yet, but based on the numbers. And now it's telling me what the next 3 to 4 weeks should look like. Moving forward, seeing that I'm able to maintain this kind of power output for a long time, I should be doing a lot of work here in the next block. And the reason for that is apparently ChatGPT estimates it's going to push my LT2 right, raising my power, raising my sustainable threshold. So that's typically what I'm doing after every workout. That is an actual well-performed training session and not like a social ride or a client ride or something like that. I'll go ahead and throw the results into ChatGPT with all the metrics I can give it and see what it says and compare with my own, knowledge. Sometimes it gives me something new.
When I asked ChatGPT, when I first did my lactate accumulation assessment, realistically, based on these numbers, given XYZ context, given the fact that I can train this many hours per week, my recovery is this, that, how much expressible fitness do you think I can gain in 12 weeks? And ChatGPT said,
You likely be looking at an FTP of around 310 to 320 watts after 12 weeks.
given the plan that they gave. So I went ahead and followed that plan. Okay, so let me walk you through the plan that ChatGPT actually gave me. It wasn't actually a bad plan at all. Again, data plus context can give you a really good plan. So again, this was based on raising my FTP to around 330 watts. And the biggest point of leverage for me was clearly fat oxidation. So in previous lab lactate accumulation, we noticed that my fat oxidation was really low. And that's because traditionally for me, I haven't done a lot of zone 2 in the past even year or so. I've been very tight on time, having a newborn and all. So fat oxidation was low. And we focused on that as the biggest point of leverage. The goal was train 7 days per week, 5 to 12 hours per week, with the biggest points of leverage being increasing mitochondrial density so I can use more fat at moderate power, flattening my lactate curve, raising LT1 and raising LT2, increasing my tempo durability, and keeping my anaerobic work. So it was really heavy on building the aerobic engine. The first 4 weeks were heavily based on aerobic conditioning. We were doing fasted rides, a lot of zone 2, and I committed to spending anywhere between 9 and 12 hours a week on the bike doing those zone 2 hours. For, an entrepreneur who's also a dad and a husband, that takes time. But I committed for those 4 weeks knowing I'm going to be spending a little bit extra time on the bike so I could raise my LT1, raise my LT2, increase fat oxidation. We were doing a couple of long rides per week. We were doing some fasted rides where about halfway through I would start eating. And everything was relatively low-ish intensity with high volume. Weeks 5 to 8, we continued doing zone 2, but we started adding some more intensity. Now we're adding a lot more tempo work, and we're actually starting to add short sweet spot intervals as well. We were throwing a little bit of short threshold progression, starting at 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, just to introduce to the body what's going to be coming up in the next few weeks. And then the more we were progressing, the more we were also overloading that. So we went from doing 10-minute, let's say 2 by 10 minute thresholds to 2 by 20 minutes, 3 by 10 minutes, 3 by 20 minutes. We started doing an hour 15, hour and a half at tempo. And then zone 2 became kind of a little bit more maintenance, where it just became, let's say, 1 hour of steady state zone 2, just more so for maintenance, sometimes 90 minutes of steady state zone 2. But everything at this point has been fully fuels, no fasted work at all. That was just in the first 4 weeks. So the estimate from ChatGPT was that my maximal fat oxidation would move from 0.14 to anywhere between 0.25 to 0.4 grams per minute in 12 weeks. They also estimated my LT1 would move from around, let's say 175 to around 200 to 230. My LT2 would move from 250 to 280, 285. My actual functional field FTP will move around 300 to 320. And if I rigorously followed the plan, recovered well, etc., I probably could hit field FTP of 330. Limitations of ChatGPT, quite a few. It is way too much of a yes man, even when you don't want it to be. So many times I was like, don't flatter me, just give me what I need to know how to improve. Don't flatter, don't overestimate, be realistic, even be conservative a little. Like, the thing was, when it told me, hey, in 12 weeks, you could probably be at a 320 or 330 watt FTP, I got really excited. And for the first 6 to 8 weeks of training, I took it really seriously. I was executing well. For the first 6 weeks of training, I was executing flawlessly. Then I took a deload week, did some threshold progressions, but let's just say, even in its estimation, it was still very optimistic and telling me what I want to hear, not what I needed to hear. Thus, ChatGPT was a little bit too affirming and positive, meaning all its let's be elegant, precise, and direct, no fluff. Here's the straight, no fluff, no cap, honest truth was never honest. It was never actual. It was always over-predicting and telling me what I wanted to hear. The second obvious limitation of ChatGPT using it as your coach is that in order to get anything out of it, you have to do input. For example, let's say that I finish a workout and it's uploaded to Training Peaks. If you have a human coach, a client would finish their workout, I'd go ahead and analyze it and I'd leave a comment. I could then use that to change next week's training, to adapt it. However, with AI, with ChatGPT, at least with its current model, you have to be the one to give some kind of input for it to give you an output. If you don't give it a prompt, it will not go in, analyze your data, and tweak next week's training for you or even tomorrow's training for you unless you ask it to. Obviously, that's a limitation. What if I slept poorly? What if I executed poorly? What if I didn't eat at all? What if X, Y, and Z? So there you have another limitation. Now, one of the pros, I think, of using AI for coming up with a plan is obviously very knowledgeable. You can't doubt that. And the more data we feed it, the more it knows. And this is not just your data. They're collecting information from everybody. Every time you use ChatGPT, you use some kind of AI, you make a prompt, it's collecting data, it's training its models, and it's getting better. So it's not just surfing the web, but it's also collecting internal models, internal data based on user experience, based on what users are prompting it and asking it and giving it. So point being, it's going to continue getting better. And the better it gets, the better plans it could make you. So I think one of the pros is it has the potential to make a really good plan. Okay, so let's talk results. So, beginning of October, my first FTP test. And this was just the field test. We measured at 265 watts. At the end of October, when I did the metabolic test, when I did the lactate accumulation assessment and the field test was 272 watts. And a couple of days ago, my field test put me at 295 watts. Not quite 330 or 320 as ChatGPT predicted, but we're working our way up. As for the lactate accumulation, so when we did this in October, our LT1 was sitting at 240 watts. LT2 sitting around 275 watts. Now, when we did this just a couple of days ago, LT1 was a little bit higher this time because the blood lactate at 240 watts was a little bit lower. So instead of peaking at 1.9, it peaked at 1.6. So a little bit lower. Nothing crazy, of course, but that means the body got a little bit more efficient at clearing the lactate. However, LT2 stayed the same with 275 watts, bringing my blood lactate to 4.5 millimoles. And for some reason, we also did the next interval at 310 watts, where I started at 4.5 millimoles and ended the 7-minute interval at 8.3 millimoles. So clearly well above LT2. Anyways, those are the results. Let me know what you thought of the video. Let me know what you thought of the results. Hope you enjoyed, and catch you next time. Ciao.